I will kick things off then. First of all, welcome to everyone who was able to join us. We wanted to take this opportunity just to give you a bit of an update on the Heritage Committee's activities at KCIC. And we've got some exciting news, which is why we have a couple of guest speakers with us. So we're very much looking forward to sharing that news with you. So I'm just going to quickly share our slide deck.
Actually, Gord, we have some new names on here I'm not familiar with. Do you want to do a few introductions?
Oh, yeah, we can do a quick introduction. That's a great idea, Don. So let's start with Horatio. Horatio, if you don't mind, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself?
Oh, hi. So this is Horacio and Cecilia from Calgary. We are originally from Argentina, and we are descendant from my grandfather was from Varese, Lonate Cepino, and we also are Italian.
Perfect. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And the other one I see that I don't recognize is Stefano.
Hi, yeah. Yeah, I just saw it online and I've been wanting to join the club for the past year or so here. But then because of COVID and everything got put on hold. But yeah, I'm really interested in some events and gatherings that hopefully we can have in the future.
Looking forward to having you join us.
Okay, Stefano's not logged on twice.
Yeah, we're going to get a bit of a feedback.
He logs off one of his screens. He's on site.
Sorry, did that work?
No, we're still getting feedback.
There, that should work.
I'm just going to try muting everyone. All right. Do we have feedback? Okay. We'll unmute as we go. Somewhere in the mix, we're getting feedback. But let me go ahead and share screen. All right, so I'm Gord Hotchkiss. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Heritage Committee. Don, who's also joined us, Don Ramponi is the other co-chair. And we just want to walk you through some of the plans we've been making and some of the news we want to announce. A little bit of an agenda. We're going to be talking about some partnerships that we're very excited about. We'll give you an overview of the committee. We'll give a bit of an update of our legacy project, run over our presentation schedule for 2021-2022 that we're very excited about, and just talk a little bit about the videos that we'll be working on as we go forward. But before I go any further, I want to welcome and introduce one of our special guests, Maria Cioni. Maria, I'm going to stop the share. And Maria's from ICAP, and we joined ICAP, I guess, in the spring. And I am not going to tell you about ICAP. I'm going to let Maria do that. But I think it's a very exciting partnership for us.
There we go. Thanks, Gord. Hello, everybody. I'm really pleased to be in the beautiful land of BC, although a little bit wet. I'm here in Toronto. ICAP, though, is across the country because we are a national network. We are also a registered charity. And our mission is to collaborate and engage people across the country in order to save Italian Canadian heritage for the future. So we want those generations that come after us to know our stories and to know the contributions that Italian Canadians made to this country across the country. And ICAP has existed for about 12 years now. We call it 10 plus 2 because we were going to have this great big 10th anniversary celebration, but COVID appeared. So we're still thinking 10 as a decade, but now we're just adding years to that. So our membership is really comprised of experts who are academics or in the archive, museum, library world. And then we have community members across the country in communities such as your Kelowna Canadian Italian Club. And we also have students and individuals who are interested in their own stories, their own narratives. So with this kind of three-part expertise, we have the ability, again, across the country to assist others to get going and find their stories and get started. We have a toolkit, we have resources, and then we have the experience of board and members. So we all try to help each other really in order to further the cause of identifying the Italian Canadian narrative in this country. And the work you're doing in Kelowna is really fabulous because you are fortunate to have quite a long history in Western Canada, plus you have a lot of characters and a lot of people who did very, very interesting things. So important for not only you to know that, but it's important for all of Canada to know that. And that really sums up what ICAP is trying to do, is to promote that national awareness. I'm going to stop there because there may be questions, Gord.
Yeah, if anyone had a specific question for Maria about ICAP or about our potential engagement with ICAP going forward, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or if you'd rather not ask it verbally, you can enter it in the chat box and I'll ask Maria on your behalf.
I can also say a few more words, Gordon, about the ICAP view of our relationship with the Kelowna Canadian Italian Club. And that is locally, we have local committees in ICAP and also members who are active locally, because we believe that the activity of finding our heritage is exactly that. It's a local endeavor. And so ICAP is very inclusive and it doesn't try to impose. It's, this is the way we do things. You've got to do things that way. So we're very collaborative, and ways in which we can help are to use our network and also to, there may be, you're engaged, for example, in a lot of video work. And as Dawn and Gordon and others know, for example, in Halifax, Professor Nancy Spina has just done a nice video on immigrants in Halifax, where she interviewed 12 women in the Italian Canadian community. And so now you know about Nancy, and Nancy knows about you. So, you know, it's possible to start a discussion of what she did that might be of interest to helping you along, and vice versa. So it's kind of like, I don't, if you're a scientist, I guess we would be one of those platforms that enable different chemicals to come together. But this is what we try to do. And we're there to tell others as well about the good work you're doing, because you can be helpful to others as well. Gord, you're muted.
You'd think I'd know that by now. Yeah, and I think just from Maria's description, you can understand why we felt that this was a match made in heaven as we were launching our own initiative here to find an organization that's really dedicated to assisting clubs like ours across Canada and to be able to collaborate. And I think when we get to the presentation section, you'll already see how we're benefiting from that collaboration, because a lot of the content we're going to be presenting came to us through connections that were made through ICAP. So that's very exciting. I am going to move on to our second guest.
Gordon, excuse me, I see David has his hand up.
Yeah, just strictly from a selfish point of view here from Kelowna. If you're a registered charity, is it possible to send funds specifically earmarked for projects such as the KCIC Legacy Project?
Okay, so I'm sorry to tell you that we have not great amount of funds. We have limited funds. We might be able to leverage, a little bit of money, but our strength would probably be to help, or maybe even introduce you to others that might be potential funders.
I'm just thinking that if our club is not a registered charity, then we donate money to you so that it gets to our club.
Oh, I see. As a member.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to just give you my general knowledge. Our treasurer, Caroline DeCoco, is very expert on all the details. But generally, if you donate to ICAP, it's possible for then ICAP to redirect those funds to, in this case, Kelowna. So if there was somebody in your club or in your city that said, I want to give some money to this legacy project, so they could donate to ICAP and say, we're interested that this money go to Kelowna. And so we could redirect those funds to you, and the donor would get a registration for tax purposes. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to our second guest, and another partnership we're very excited about. This one's a little more of a focus on the Okanagan. I've invited Linda Digby, the executive director of the Kelowna Museum Society. Linda, you're up.
Thank you, Gord. Very, very happy to be here and really thrilled to be a part of this project. If my math is right, Italians have been a big part of our story here in the Okanagan for 138 years. That's a long time by by settlement history standards here in BC, especially in the Okanagan. So right from the beginning. And not only present, but playing really, really significant roles in terms of crafting the storyline and the direction of how settlement happened here back in the 1800s. So just a huge, huge influence. And, you know, the more I dig deep into whatever topic of local history, you know, I keep finding Italians there, and it's really fascinated. And I want to thank Gordon and Don for putting that on my radar. I may not have noted so much that some of these people and some of these names I kept running into, you know, that the pattern of Italian influence. And in particular, I want to say that in the last few years, as I've been researching the wine and orcharding and agricultural history of the Okanagan, as we are undergoing a complete renewal of our galleries at the Laurel Packing House that are dedicated to those stories. And wow, wine and orchard industry, man, with agriculture and wine, man, the local Italians have been really, really key in this. It would not have unfolded the way it did without our Italians in our community. So excited to be able to dig deeper in that. You know, as a museum, we try to create a polyphonic space, you know, a space where different voices and different stories and different narratives and different experiences of local history can be mobilized and shared with the greater community. And working with this club on a variety of projects is just a really exciting way to do that. And what's even better is we didn't have to think of this ourselves. Like your club members here, and I want to thank Don and Gordon in particular, like they saw an opportunity, they saw a need, and they're extremely well organized and very knowledgeable and just doing a brilliant job of getting this work happening. And you know, it's, as a museum, it's harder for us to do that when we you know, we're not in the community. So we really rely on partners like you to do the kind of work that we would like to do. So some things I'm particularly excited about at the Okanagan Wine and Orchard Museum. We're getting close to ready to start layering in now some new stories and about individuals who have had a key role in the orchard and wine industries. And so your club is going to be helping us bring some individuals into that space based on, which is just sort of a way to leverage all of the work that's been done, the oral history work, the archival work that's been done. That'll leverage that into a public display area where it'll be available for thousands and thousands of people every year to experience and learn from and be inspired by. So that's one thing we're really excited about. We're also excited that that same project, all of this oral history work is finding a repository in the Kelowna Public Archives, so that it's in a place where researchers, historians, family members for generations to come in perpetuity will be able to come back and find these stories and learn about those early families and the families today, and how they've been a part of the fabric of Kelowna. So that's tremendously exciting work. And I know it's not easy work. I know it's a lot of time. And so I just really want to thank all of you who've been involved in that. And then the next piece that I'm really excited about is something we've been talking about for a couple of years now. And now we see it on the horizon in 2023, fall of 2023. We'll be opening the doors on a feature exhibition at the Okanagan Heritage Museum, what many of you know as the museum or the Centennial Museum, or goes by lots of names, but it's the Okanagan Heritage Museum downtown. And that's our flagship facility. And it's so in the fall of 2023, we'll be opening a special feature exhibition that'll be open for a few months, probably about 4 months, and that will be showing those stories, creating an experience where visitors can engage with the story by the material objects, by the pictures, the stories, the documents that create an environment in which people will fall into and the fascinating story of the contribution of Italians here through our settlement history. So really thrilled to be working on that. I really hope to be meeting some of you in the process, and learn more about your family stories. And we certainly hope that when the day comes and we celebrate the opening of that special exhibition, that you will be there to celebrate with us along with your family and friends. So looking forward to that. And thank you very much to all of you for your commitment to history. We appreciate it. We need you, and we're really delighted to work with you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Does anybody have any specific questions for Linda? I'm so excited that we got to share this news. This has been something that Dawn and I, as Linda mentioned, have been discussing for a long time. And she kind of teased the opening a little bit by saying Italians have been in the area for 138 years. 2023, of course, is 140 years of continuous Italian settlement in the central Okanagan. And that's kind of why we take that date. Yeah, if anyone, before we kind of move on, if anyone has any questions for Linda, you can either just jump in or raise your hand. If you know how to do that on Zoom, it's under your, I believe, reactions button. Let's give it a moment. Don, while we're waiting, did you have anything that you've been integral in this? Anything you want to add?
I can just add that we have started a document of all possible exhibits we could put in there, and people's names of where we could borrow it from for the exhibit. And so if anybody has any more ideas to contribute to that, we'll put it out soon to our membership. It's basically possible themes that are important to the Italian development here, and actually objects and where to borrow them from, and then the contact names and phone numbers. So we're putting that document together, and it's quite extensive already, but we're always looking for more, and those unusual objects that tell our story. Give the information that we have in your home that you could lend us. These won't be donations necessarily to the museum, but we borrow them for a while. Because we're always looking for donations as well. Objects, pictures, photographs, documents that become part of the permanent archive collection. So we're doing both parts of that. So we
Maria,
like that.
Maria, yeah, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, because I'm very excited by hearing what Donna said about your list of various themes and all the wonderful things that people may have and who they are, et cetera, because I think just that information as part of your website would be very interesting to others who are thinking, gosh, what's going on in Kelowna? And they could see that list. So I see two purposes for the list. I see Don's original purpose, but also that listing to kind of it's like giving kudos to the club and to the community for having tended these little treasures and that they're available then to show others. That's all I wanted to say.
Good point. We'll do that.
Thanks so much. And that's actually a nice segue into the remainder of the session, where we're going to talk about our plans leading up to 2023 and beyond, and how that may manifest itself not only in a physical exhibit space, but also a digital virtual exhibit as we go forward. So I am just going to share the screen again here. Linda, this was your slide, but I didn't go to it, but I'll give everyone a moment to linger on this before I go forward. All right, one of the things that we did, again, kind of in the summer, spring, was to think about what the structure of the committee is and what projects we had underway, and also what the outcomes of those projects were. So we kind of have 6 streams of activity that we've been working on or are planning on working on. We've got the video series, of course, and most of you will be familiar with that. We also have Dawn's Family Stories, the first family series. And we wanted to enrich those maybe with some multimedia content moving forward. And as Maria just mentioned, as we get donations and more things in, it gives us a kind of a natural way to categorize those based on families and family lineages. The archives, of course, Linda mentioned that the final home of these will be the Kelowna Public Archives. There's our presentation series. I'm going to be talking more about that in a second. One of the things that the committee has also emerged as is a real media and community resource for all things Italian, whether it's history or whether it's current cultural things. Certainly with Trudeau's apology in the summer on internment, we became a bit of a media clearinghouse for a very intensive week where we were fielding requests, not just from local media, but we actually helped coordinate a reporter from the Washington Post and put her in contact with spokespeople for that as well. So that's an ongoing thing that we're serving as well. And then, of course, there's our workshops, the Family Tree Workshop. And tomorrow night, we're going to be starting just an informal drop-in session for anyone who's working on their own family history to troubleshoot, share successes, ask questions. The outcomes of that, the first 3 all are bundled together in what we're calling our legacy project. There was the physical exhibit that Linda was talking about, which will be housed within the Kelowna Museum, but there will also be a virtual exhibit that will be interactive and will probably eventually live on its own website, which will be connected to our club website. Also, one thing that I should mention through ICAP is there's also something called the Italian Canadian Narrative Showcase, which is an online showcase to share these stories across Canada. Maria, did you want to talk quickly just about ICNS?
Yes, so the Italian Canadian Narrative Showcase is actually being reformulated into models, different kinds of things that communities and individuals did with their findings and how they did it and why they did it, etc. So that will become a showcase not only for specific heritage information, but also it will become information on practice and projects, like how did this come to be formulated? What worked, what didn't work, those kinds of things. So that is our plan for ICNS, to evolve it into models and also showcase.
And one of the things I'll mention about both ICAP and the Narrative Showcase is one of the things we had a chance to meet with a couple of key individuals in ICAP when I was visiting my daughter in Guelph, Gabriella, who's the president, and Sandra from the University of Guelph, who actually started the Narrative Showcase. And one thing in particular is, in Mark and Mary, I'm looking at you. This isn't the only club we belong to. We've come from other places, and those other places have their own stories. And ICAP gives us a way to perhaps go to trail, to clubs we know in the trail area or wherever we might have come from, and say, don't get rid of your history. That history is incredibly important. And if you can't, get in touch with ICAP and let them know what you have, and they'll help you through the process of perhaps sharing that history in a way so it doesn't disappear. we're at a very critical point now where a lot of our history and our heritage is sitting in boxes and bins in attics and basements. And I just had firsthand experience with that a couple of weeks ago when I visited some members of the Casorso family, which is of course where this 140 years begins with, and said, we've got boxes of stuff, we just don't have the opportunity to go through it. And I said, well, don't do anything with those boxes. We'll come up with a solution. And that's true for the trails and the Nanaimos and the Powell Rivers and that throughout the province. And we all have individual connections with those communities and those organizations. So we are hoping to become a little bit of a BC Interior ambassador for ICAP and their mission. So certainly those of you who are here, feel free to help reach out to us and we'll help make those connections happen.
Gordon, pardon me for saying, but you know, it's possible that to not only have your activities as is your displaying tonight, but to evolve into a kind of, you know, ICAP Southern BC or ICAP British Columbia entity to, you know, bring others into a fold to try and support them, just as you said.
So moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about the family stories because honestly, that's where this all started. It was a pet project of Don's that he had been thinking about for a while. It started 3 years ago, where he just said, look, I just want to do family histories of those early Italian families. And I think it's fair to say that it's gained momentum every year. And I think Don now has at least 1 year in the queue waiting for those stories to be told, and possibly 2 years in the queue. I'll give Don a chance to talk about that in just a minute. But when we're talking about what we wanted to do with the museum and also with our virtual exhibits is to use those stories, those text-based stories that live, but find other ways to bring them to life. You know, maybe oral history interviews that are multimedia links off that, more pictures, more documents. And one of the things that's really fascinating, I think, and Don and I talked a little bit about this, is the linkages between those families. One of the reasons why Kelowna, and this is not unique to Kelowna, the same pattern is repeated in community after community all through Canada, but there's something called chain migration, chain immigration patterns, where one family sponsors other families and they bring them in. And before you know it, those linkages form community cores that become embedded in the broader context of the community and really shape the nature of what the Italian presence in that community is. And we're certainly seeing that pattern take place here in Kelowna. And when we look at those kind of waves of migration that came in, whether it was Northern Italy with the Casorsos and the Ramponis and the Risos and those families, or whether it was a little bit later where there was another wave that came from Tuscany, and then you had the Turis and you know, that group, even post World War II, where you had a huge influx of migration from Southern Italy, from Calabria and that. So, you know, we have these chains of migration and they form very distinct aspects of the community. And hopefully these family stories, when we look at the linkages, will help tell that story as well. So Don, this is your baby. I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about this.
Could we do a screen share, please? Let me do a screen share.
Sure. Let me give me 2 seconds to make that happen. Okay, you should be good to go.
We're on here. Okay, oops. Okay, this is the start of our first family series in 2019. It wasn't envisioned to be beyond the first year project, but it just grew on me, so it did. But in 2019, to celebrate Italian Heritage Month in June, I decided to put out one story a day for the 30 days of families that were here before for over 100 years, so effective 2019. So though families have been here 100 years, we put them in this book, and they're very short stories. They're a photograph and a very, very skimpy story, in some cases very skimpy. They're only meant to document the names and get interest going. But by 2020 came along, we said, well, let's keep this project going. And so for 2020, we did 30 more stories. These predominantly arrived in the 20s and 30s. And the stories are getting more researched, more detailed, longer. And then 2021, we looked at doing the 40s and 50s. So families predominantly that arrived in the 40s and 50s. And so now we've got 3 years under our belts. We have 90 stories collected. And now we're just looking at 2022. So starting in January, we're going to be writing stories about predominantly arriving in the 60s, but a particular focus, the founders and builders of the Kelowna Canadian Italian Club. Since the club was started in the 60s, we thought that would be a good feature. So we're going to look at all the presidents and the founding members and write stories about them. And so I'm going to need some help on this one. There's families I don't know of. So we're going to need some more help. So we'll put the list out shortly, and we're going to be looking for our club members to get some help on that. And another thing that we've noticed over the years, the 2019 stories, I pretty well wrote them all myself through research and work. But by last year, the majority of the stories in the book were written by family members. So that's been fantastic. Of course, we get much more flavorful story. There's a heart in the stories as opposed to just facts and figures. So we're looking forward to the next year's stories. And we thought the 5th year of the project, which is as far as I've envisioned for now, so 2023, being looking at the families that moved here that were born in Kelowna from those early arrivals. So they were sort of born in the 20s and 30s, and they were actually born here and from immigrant parents. So that's our focus for that year. And I thought at the end of 5 years, it'd be nice to put them all together and make an index for it. Right now, it's quite searchable on the internet because it doesn't matter if there's an index or not, but we thought we'd put it together in one book with an index so that they could find out the stories. And that's as far as the project is envisioned at this point, although there's been a lot of suggestions for what we could do past that date. So that's where we stand right now. But one of the things that we found out in the stories, and Gord alluded to it, that we're looking at these pockets of immigration and the pattern that followed. We've sort of put together a map of the arrivals, the ones that came from Piemonte, the ones that came from Tuscany, and the ones from Calabria. We were a little short of one area, and that's the Friuli ones. And I've got relatives myself, a great aunt that came from the Friuli area, but we really don't know much about the pattern for those arrivals. But we did find, this is through an ICAP connection. One day, this book arrived in our mailbox. And it may have all the answers to these questions that we're looking for. Is the story of how the Western Friuli immigration. And I haven't read it yet. So I believe this came through an ICAP connection, Gord?
Yeah, Avier is a consultant or a advisor to ICAP. He's actually in Italy, but he's been working on Friuli immigration for quite some time. And you know, it's kind of interesting how ICAP works, because we knew Avier, and actually we knew a gentleman from the Powell River Club, Reg Siciliano. And Reg, I met Reg, he was actually here in the seniors game cycling, and we kind of made sure he got to where he was going, and he's been phoning us like once a month ever since. He's the most incredible man. And he was talking to me about, you know, his path here through Switzerland, then to the Michelle area in eastern, southeastern BC, eventually ending up in Powell River. And it just so happens that his family is in this book that Dawn is talking about. So ICAP really helps make those connections happen. We can kind of connect the right people. So it's really, I think, helping us connect the dots on some of these stories.
Then one more family story. This is I don't know if you're going to talk about this one later, but let's do it now. This is a new book out. It's a beautiful family story, and I think it really fits well. And the story of Ilya. And Ilya is still living, and she lives actually in the same residence my mother does, and I've met her. Delightful lady. So this book we bought our second copy for the club. And David, I think you're interested in reading this one? If you are, get the copy from Gord as soon as he's finished with it. Okay, I'll get the second one circling other areas. Roseanne, I'll get you the second copy coming your way. It's a beautiful story, and she is a very animated, lovely, well-spoken lady. And her daughter, Linda, wrote the book, and her daughter lives here too, in Kelowna. So they'll make a dandy presentation. Hopefully we can do a live presentation with them if we can hold off that long, but maybe we can do some work beforehand with a video interview or some talking to her beforehand during COVID regulations. Beautiful family story, loving story, quite a tragic life, but it tells the story of most Italians can tell, whichever region they lived in. This comes from the Friuli area, but I think it's the same story anywhere I hear. During wartime, the story takes place during World War II, and it's a great story. And it's a beautiful family story. And the more we can find these kind of things, I think the better, and start sharing those around, because it tells a great story. Okay. So that's all I have, Gord. Well,
all right, and just about that book, I'm a bit of a writing snob. I was very impressed with the quality of the writing. It as Don said, it's very well written. All right, let me go back. So that's the family stories. The archive project, I'm not going to talk a lot about. There's a couple of things in motion right now about what that might look like, but the objective of that is to find some way to go through these boxes of materials and capture the relevant and the historically significant things and get them in a format that will live in perpetuity in the archives. So we're going to continue to work on that. More news to come on that front. We were very excited about our 2021-2022 presentation schedule. By the way, I was just working today to put all the registration links up for these sessions. So you can register for all of them now if you want. And I think, again, this is a really good indication of how connecting the dots allows us to, first of all, become aware of some of these stories, but also to be able to bring in people who can help us tell those stories. So a few of you know Adriana Davies, and again, she's very involved with ICAP. She did some extensive research on some of the early Italians in the Crow's Nest Pass. And in one in particular was a notorious bootlegger that was actually hung, I believe, for murdering a policeman. So in December, Adriana is going to join us to talk about that. A fascinating story that I only became aware of just a few months ago, and it happened right in our backyard in Vernon with Sveva Kitani. So I am just going to give you the Coles Note version of this. Her family was one of the best known noble families from Italy. I believe her father was a duke. They decided, I believe in the 1920s, to move to Vernon. The father passed away a while after that. The mother dealt with some significant issues of mental illness and anxiety, and basically held Sveva captive in the house for 25 years. She wasn't allowed to go out. She wasn't allowed to go to school. And it wasn't until her mother passed away that she started rediscovering the outside world. She rose from that to become one of Canada's best known artists, and did, I think, a 53 painting cycle called Recapitulation, which is stunning. There is now the Kitani Center in Vernon. If you ever get a chance to tour it, you're through Vernon, do so. But Susan Brandley, who's the executive director up there, is going to be joining us to tell us more about that story. Dialects, of course, when we talk about Italian language, we talk a lot about dialects. Mary loves talking Calabrese when she's in meetings, so you know we all know that. So Gabriella Calusi Arthur, who's a professor emeritus at York University and teaches languages, is going to be joining us to talk about the evolution of Italian dialects, what it meant there and what it meant after immigration in terms of cohesiveness in communities and that. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. We talked a lot about the beginning of Okanagan agriculture. We're going to have Rob Casorso join us to talk about those early seeds of agriculture and how that has continued through the years. The Casorso story is another one of those amazing stories. The same family has farmed the same land for 5, now going on 6 generations, which is pretty remarkable. So from 1883 and between 1883 and 1907, 3 homes were built for the Casorso family. 2 of those still exist. One is on one side of Casorso Road and one is on the other side of Casorso Road. I've had the chance to look in and tour both of them, and they are literally living museums. They are amazing. So there's a really rich story there that Rob will be joining us to tell. And then finally, Maria mentioned before Nancy Spina from Halifax, who talked about the experiences of women coming to Pier 21 and then choosing to settle in the Halifax area. And Nancy will be joining us in April. We'll be doing a special showing of the documentary. It's not a very long documentary, and then having a conversation with Nancy after. So I think the richness and the diversity of this presentation schedule really speaks to some of the connections we've been able to make through ICAP. And of course, our workshops. We do have a new series of workshops starting in January. Our first series that happened back in April were tremendously successful. I think everyone really enjoyed them. So we're going to be repeating those. Dawn and I kind of did a little juggling with the schedule, but they're basically still cover all the same territory we did in the original series. This time around, we will be charging a small fee for non-members, $35 for the entire series of 8 workshops, a bargain, but they are free to members. Registration links aren't up yet, but those will be going up shortly. And before I go on to the Legacy Project, I'll just pause for a sec to see if anyone has any questions about anything I just covered.
Gord, maybe we could just mention also the session that starts tomorrow night, the chat nights, the family tree chat nights.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, once a month, we sort of thought it'd be a good idea for anybody doing family tree work, just have a chat night. And it's just a model that I've made after our garden club. Our garden club, or pardon me, our genealogical association membership is actually growing during Zoom thing. They have their meetings by Zoom, but our members decided they want more than just our meetings. And our meetings are sort of 10 minutes business meetings and a presentation each night, but still our members want it more. So once a month we do chat nights, and any topic goes. We have a few topics we put out if nobody else has any other questions or comments, but it's just members talking about genealogy. So we thought we'd do the same with the Italian club and have family tree chat nights. Our first one is tomorrow night. They're free. They're at 7 o'clock. So once a month on the 3rd Thursday, we're going to do these chat nights and just to chat about family trees, stumbling blocks, help each other get through things or interesting things we found. Anything goes. And it's a chance for our members to informally talk to each other about family trees and whatever else is happening. So it starts tomorrow night at 7 o'clock.
Thanks, Don. So with the Legacy Project, we've been very fortunate to get some great partners to come to the table to help us fund that. So we did earlier this year get a Heritage BC grant for a little over $7,000. There was, of course, the original seed capital that got this project underway that was fronted by the club. The city of Kelowna with a cultural grant came in for $2,000. The Kelowna District Genealogical Society contributed $1,000 to the project. Our friends at Kelowna Museums committed to supplying $1,000. The Okanagan Historical Society came on for $500, giving us a total of just over $14,000 to help fund the production of this video. So we're very fortunate, and we're very fortunate because that takes us well along the timeline we need to meet the goals that we want to meet by 2023. So phase one, which includes 2 videos, those are currently under production. We're hoping to have those substantially completed by spring of the coming year. Then we can go into phase 3, where we'll be really focused on hopefully getting out 3 more videos and working with the Kelowna Museum Society to bring this exhibit together. And again, our funding is in place for the production of the videos beyond that. Phase 3, we're hoping to produce another 5 videos and help extend all that into a virtual exhibit. And so we're well on the way. And the nice thing is for the next year and a half, we can focus on actually production and not fundraising, because I have found it's very difficult to do those 2 things at the same time. So now we can kind of make sure we focus on getting these materials done and out, and hopefully do another round of looking for funding. I will say in our research, there's some federal funding in a couple of project streams that look very promising and look like a good match for our project. So we're hopefully this success will continue. And I believe too that as we get videos out, momentum will build, and we're going to find more potential funding sources that will come on board. We also were fortunate to put an extremely valuable advisory board together. Adriana Davies, Lynn Bowen, who wrote the book, Whoever Gives Us Bread, the history of Italians in BC. Linda, our special guest tonight, and also anyone who has been involved in any aspect with local history is probably familiar with Bob Hayes. He is a walking encyclopedia of local history, and he's proven to be very valuable in helping us tell our stories in a broader historical context. So Bob has been very helpful in that regard as well. So the videos that are currently under production, the first is the Consorso story, and there are multiple reasons for that, but the more research you do into the Consorso family, you really discover how foundational they were to establish. They really built the foundation that all the subsequent waves of immigration layered on top of in Kelowna. So to understand what the Italian experience in Kelowna is, you have to go back to the roots and understand what happened with the Consorso family when Giovanni first came here in 1883. It wasn't just the chain migration patterns, it was really their success in so many endeavors locally that really built a respect for Italians that then carried forward into new families, whether they were the Ramponis or the Rissos or the Barreras or the Lanfrancos, or eventually, you know, Turis and Guidis and others. All those people coming was layered on this foundation. And so I think it's a really foundational story that we have to tell. But then that very quickly layered into what was happening early in the 20th century, where a new nation was really building the infrastructure required for settling the area, whether it was railroads or irrigation works. And a lot of that labor and a lot of that skill came from Italian immigrants. And that's another story that we have to tell. Certainly in other areas like the Crow's Nest Pass and Vancouver Island, it was mining that was a bigger deal. That wasn't necessarily the case here, but the labor of Italians really helped create the infrastructure. And then of course there was the agricultural roots that were embedded in that time. Now, the Okanagan Mission was largely farmed by Italians. So, whoops. Kelowna also had some very interesting migration patterns just because it was so focused on agriculture. So in between World War I and World War II, there was very little immigration coming into the local area, and what was largely sponsored by families that were already here farming. And that set up a very different pattern as we went into World War II. We didn't have a big influx of labor that was essentially working at things like mining and smelters and that was true in other places. And so we didn't have the same fractures in the community going into World War II that was common, that actually led to a lot of animosity towards Italians in places like Trail, in places like Nanaimo, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. We've talked at some length about what the internment process was like. And one of the big and most interesting things about it was, why didn't it happen to the same extent here? And to understand that story, you kind of have to know what happened between World War I and World War II. Linda was talking about the wine industry. For anyone interested in the wine industry, there is a book called Valleys of Wine. That's an incredible history of the industry in BC. It's written by a gentleman who lives down in Okanagan Falls called Luke Whittle. And Luke, in that book, says, if anyone deserves to be called the godfather of the BC wine industry, it's Giovanni Casorso. The Italians, again, were so instrumental in kicking off this industry that is such a big part of the Okanagan's nature now. And one of the interviews we did back in the summer was with Linda Ben-Hamida, but Linda was a Getzi. And she just told fascinating stories about the early days of Kelowna wines, and her father and her grandfather, who really started it. So there's a really rich and fascinating story there. And of course, so many members of our clubs have history that goes back to Kelowna wines or the wine industry as well. So that's definitely something we want to focus on. We did talk a lot about World War II, and there are some very interesting things. We may have not had the animosity between the Italian community and the non-Italian community, but there were some very interesting things happening in Kelowna during the war. And I think that's a story that deserves to be told too. People like Cap Capozzi were very integral during that period of defining what the Italian community looked like. And there was this kind of undercurrent of trying to stay under the radar and not bringing attention to the community, but also trying to retain the pride that they had in their own community and those community connections during the war. And so it was a very interesting balancing act. Again, fascinating story to tell. As we move forward into phase 3, this is where it really comes home to for a lot of us in the club. This is where we get into our own individual stories. And a lot of that happened after World War II, those waves of immigration that came into Canada. So what did that look like? We've done a number of interviews now of talking to people about their experience, what it was like in a lot of cases growing up in Italy during World War II, and then what was life like after that, and how hard was it to adjust to Kelowna. There was a lot of cases of matchmaking where marriages were sometimes done by proxy with a bride that still lived in Italy. And this bride came out to Canada not knowing her husband, not having any idea what she was going to get when she was here, getting off a train in Sycamoose, getting someone to pick her up and bring her down, and suddenly, hey, welcome to your new life. Those are things for us that are hard to understand now, but we heard story after story of how that came to life. And I think it's also important to understand how the Italians colored the culture that is now Kelowna. What was it like immigrating as a child? What was it like immigrating as a woman? History tends to be written from a male voice, and we want to break that down and make sure that we're capturing all the perspectives. Of course, we can't talk about Italians unless we talk about food a little bit. So we'll be looking at that, the importance of food and how it's embedded in the culture and how it's embedded in community relations. In a lot of the interviews, we heard, things like, well, people would go out for a walk, you'd make pizza and you'd stop people going by and give them a piece of pizza. Well, food is a proxy for community connection, and we want to make sure that we understand that, because those of us who are embedded in the culture just kind of accept that that's the way it is, but it's really interesting to understand, well, what is the importance of that? One of the things that we don't often talk about, but the Italian contributions to sports in central Okanagan. The local Sports Hall of Fame is full of Italian names. And so it's really important to understand that as well. So those are all topics that we eventually want to cover. So that kind of leads you through, hopefully, a bit of a summary of what we've been up to over the last little while. Dawn, I'm going to toss it back to you to see if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think it's a very exciting time. And the connections that are coming, that is every day there's something else people want to add to it. And we have to watch, we don't get carried away in too many directions, but we're writing all these things down and keeping note of them.
Yeah, and just to add what Dawn said, obviously these are some pretty big plans. And one of the things we haven't been able to do as much as we would have liked, just because we haven't been in the same physical space, is to start bending people's arms or plant little hints in their ears. If these are things that get you excited, or somebody that would be excited by this, please let us know. One of the things we want to do over the next couple of months is do a reach out to our club membership and expand our committee with people who have a passion to make sure these stories get told. So you're our first line on that. So if you know people who this would tweak their interest, please let us know, or just mention it to them. And if they're interested, they can reach us out. We won't necessarily hunt them down unless they put up their hand and ask to be hunted down. Dominic, you have a question.
Well, it's probably more of a comment, but as myself and Dawn and Gordon and other people on the Zoom meeting here have had discussions, things kind of tweak in my mind about different stories I've heard over the years of some of the early pioneers. So, and I think that's what these discussions and chat rooms tomorrow will bring out. You just, oh, I know somebody that knows that. But if you don't start talking about it, those things don't happen. So, I really think, and I thought of a couple stories I'll share with Gordon, Dawn after that I didn't think about till now. So I think this kind of grassroots thing of how things happened and why they happened, or some interesting backroom stories that aren't written down anywhere, but they were an integral part of what happened in every community in Canada. So it's exciting for sure.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. This has to be a grassroots initiative. And, Linda and I actually had a chat on the phone the other day, and she said, what you guys can do that is so valuable that we can't do is you can open the doors. You can find out where these stories live, and you can make us aware of them. And, I think doing that at a grassroots level is exactly what we need to do. And there's no story that's not important, right? Because they all get weaved together into a tapestry that tells a more cohesive story. And so if it's the story of a grandparent that had a tough voyage over, or the story of an ancestor that had something interesting happen to them, they worked in an interesting place, or perhaps they had experiences in the community that stuck out in their minds. Those are the stories we need to know, because individually they may not seem like much, but quite often they're indicative of a bigger story that then we can dig a little bit deeper and further into. Anybody else have any questions before I turn it over to David to take us home? All right, well, I am going to sign off and let David have the last word, but thanks so much for joining us. We've been very excited about about sharing this news with membership. If any of you, most of you on this know how to reach me. If you have anything you want to follow up with offline. But David, I am now going to pass it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gord. On behalf of the members of KCIC, I want to thank everyone who participated tonight in the KCIC Legacy Project. It was a pretty comprehensive update and view to the future. Special thank you to Linda Digby of the Kelowna Museums and Maria Cioni of ICAP, the Italian-Canadian Archives Project. Thanks for being part of it tonight. I know you have busy lives, so thanks for spending the hours with us. We're really happy to have your organizations involved in what we see as a very important series of projects. It really is a series of projects. They're really important at both local and national level, and we really value that partnership with both ICAP and Kelowna Museums. And we look forward to exploring our Italian heritage with your assistance. And working together, we get to share resources, promotional opportunities, and extend our reach across Canada. And of course, thanks to Gord Hotchkiss and Don Ramponi for having this vision to bring stories of Italian heritage and culture to Canadians. It's a vision that's quite extensive and covers quite a wide range of topics, from families to bootleggers. And it's an ongoing project that our club is really quite proud of. I personally look to many of these upcoming events and stories. The Della Terra, the Italian contribution to Okanagan agriculture, and especially the wines, and also hearing the Pier 21 stories, the women's view of things. And of course, La Nostra Famiglia Italiana and the legacy work really is our club's flagship project. And we're really proud of the quality of the work that both Gord, you and Don are doing. And it's been really well received by Italian Canadians across the country, and I can certainly see why. In addition, there are thousands of Italian Canadians across the whole nation who really have a story to tell, either their story or their family story. And this project will not only inform our viewers of the history of the Italian immigrants that we present, but it'll also inspire viewers to talk about their own family stories. And many of those family stories would be lost if they're not talked about. So, I mean, really, I'm also thanking you on behalf of future generations for bringing these stories to life and to stay in history, in our own history. So thank you very much, Gord and Don. We really appreciate it. And good night.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody. That was awesome. Have a good night.
Good night.